Hello there, and welcome back to Inside the Vault, episode number 51. I'm your host, Ryan Smith, and my guest tonight here on Inside the Vault, he is part of the Keep Purring Podcast, one of the co-hosts. He is Ben, along with his co-host Eric, who also does the Keep Purring Podcast. But Eric is in Germany right now with the Panthers and Giants set to face off in Germany on Sunday. But I've got Ben here from the Keep Purring Podcast here on Inside the Vault. Ben, how's it going? A late night edition of Inside the Vault, but good to be on with you.
Yeah, man, it's going great. Thanks for having me on. Like you said, my pod co-host Eric is in actually Amsterdam right now, so they're going to cap that trip off with the Panthers game. So I'm super jealous, but happy for them. I know they're having a blast.
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and just get into it. Before I go into Panthers Giants, though, in Germany, we both talked about this separately on our pods, but talk to me about the Panthers Saints. Just brief recap of last week, rather.
Yep.
And well, we can go into last year if you really want to, but no one wants to go back to last year. Panthers Saints last week. Bryce Young getting his first victory at home this season. Panthers' first victory at home, period, actually, this season. Talk to me about your just thoughts on the game and what transpired there at Bank of America Stadium last Sunday in the 23-22 win over the New Orleans Saints that saw the Panthers send a second coach to the unemployment line in Dennis Allen.
Yeah. To that point, I've had a couple people on Twitter, Saints fans, comment on my posts and say that Bryce Young is they're Bryce Young fans for life now because he got Dennis Allen fired.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, I mean, I've been a big Bryce Young guy since we drafted him. And yeah, like I wanted to draft him. I've been a huge supporter of him. But at the same time, I was one who agreed with the benching. I thought that he needed a mental reset. And it's been really cool to see that the way he's played the last couple of weeks. I think he looks like a much more confident quarterback the last 2 weeks. And against the Saints, it wasn't perfect. He made a couple mistakes, but for the most part, I thought he played really well. He had, the David Moore drop touchdown. He had the the Xavier Legette perfect pass, right, dropped it in the bucket, and it just gets ripped out of his hands. So it's interception.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it could have been a lot better statistically, but if you just look away from the box score, I thought Bryce looked confident. And he led us on a game-winning drive, and it resulted in his first ever chance to kneel it at the end of a game, which is great.
Absolutely. And obviously, before we get into the Panthers Giants specifically, Dave Canales and company, he was asked right after the game, is Bryce going to be the starter in Germany? He deflects a little bit. And then kind of show some gamemanship, in my opinion, with the Giants and kind of have them prepare for Dalton versus Bryce and, not keeping them kind of on their toes. But before we get to Panthers Giants, there's this little thing called the election. I'm just kidding. The trade deadline that happened yesterday. And saw Jonathan Mingo get shipped out to the Dallas Cowboys in return for a fourth round pick. And Ben, I'm just gonna be honest with you. If you had told me that Jonathan Mingo would have been shipped out, I would totally believe you. But where you lost me is they gave back a fourth round pick, and I would have said, wait, what? Did I hear you right? A fourth round pick, not a seventh round pick. So it's nuts. But if you zoom out, context is key to everything. If you zoom out and look at it, yes, he's cost controlled for 2 more years, 25, 26. So that plays a part in it. But let me go back and tell you what I tweeted out yesterday. Out of the 126 players with 75 targets or more over the last 2 seasons, Jonathan Mingo ranks 126th in the NFL in success rate. So to put that in perspective, the gap between Mingo and Ramondre Stevenson, who was number 125, is 3 percentage points, is larger gap between any 2 back-to-back players on this list. And so another thing that I said, Jerry Jones essentially trading a fourth-round pick for a wide receiver in Jonathan Mingo with 0 career touchdowns in 24 games when his team is 3-5 and just put Dak Prescott on the IR is certainly a choice. I think Mike Kay tweeted something very similar like that out. That's certainly a choice. And so your reaction on that trade, the only trade that the Panthers made
Yeah.
on that day, we obviously already talked about Deontay Johnson, as we know,
Mm-hmm.
back last week. So
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on that trade as a whole? Was there any other players that you wanted to see shipped out besides Jonathan Mingo, or were you happy and content the fact that we got a fourth round pick back from Dallas and kind of Mingo's refreshing start in the big D?
Yeah. On the Mingo trade, I was just as shocked as everybody. I thought that I literally was telling people that I thought that maybe we would end up cutting Mingo after this season. So the fact that we were able to get anything for him, let alone a fourth round pick. I mean, it feels, I'll just say that it feels good to be the fleecer and not the fleeced
Yes,
finally in a trade.
yes, fine.
And I just think Mingo, I mean, I wish him the best. Maybe he has some kind of resurgence in Dallas, but he was just not good in Carolina. And I know that he, wasn't in the best situation possible last year, but I don't know, you may disagree with this, but I've talked to a few people who have agreed. I don't know if I've ever seen a receiver with less body control and on-field awareness than
No, I don't.
Jonathan
I don't
Mingo.
disagree. I don't disagree at all. Watching his tape back at Ole Miss, like he had some tightness in his hips, and he had some moments at Ole Miss, but
Mhm.
the Panthers definitely overdrafted him, in my opinion, in the
Oh
second
yeah,
round. It's definitely a third, fourth round pick.
yeah,
Dallas supposedly liked him in the top 50 as well, which is why they obviously traded for him and thought um, using a fourth round pick on a player in the draft this year, we don't. They thought they were going to get better value with Mingo, us already
yeah,
having 2 years under his belt in the league. So they made their choice, but yeah,
yeah. And to your point, your second part of your question, I guess I thought that they were going to be a little bit more active at the trade deadline. I thought they would be sellers, and I thought that they would ship off a couple more players. I was really looking for Miles Sanders to
yep.
potentially be shipped off. I didn't know what we could garner for him, but
Yeah,
after
I don't think
seeing that,
much.
but after seeing that Mingo got us a fourth, I was like, well, I mean, surely Sanders could get us something.
Let's call back Jerry. Say, Jerry, give us a third.
Come
Give
on,
us
Jerry,
something.
help us out. But no, I'm happy with it. Like honestly, just the fact that we got a fourth for Mingo and we did nothing else, I think it was a successful trade deadline for the Panthers.
Yeah. And Adam Thielen, somebody who we did not trade, he was subject to a lot of trade talk. The Steelers were one of the teams I know that reached out about him.
Yeah,
Personally, I'm good to see him back on this Panther squad. I don't know if he's going to be playing in Germany on Sunday, but I feel like he is someone who's a good veteran to these receivers, younger guys like Coker, like Leggett. Obviously, David Moore is a little bit younger, but still a slightly older guy as well.
right.
Not as old as Thielen. But obviously, we'll see what happens with him down the line. But I feel like with someone like Thielen, he's a good locker room guy, good culture guy, dependable hands, good route runner. You can't ask for a lot more than what Adam Thielen gives the Carolina Panthers. He's very dependable. You know what you're getting. So I
Right.
personally like the fact that we didn't ship him out, and it was good to see him obviously return. Let's get into though now the Panthers Giants in Germany, where our old friend Brian Burns is waiting at the helm this Sunday there in Munich. And let's just preview the game. We'll first start on the offensive side of the ball. What are you looking for from Bryce Young and company against this Giants defense led by Brian Burns and Aziz Ojulari and Dexter Lawrence? We know Kayvon Thibodeau probably won't be playing in this game. He's still coming off IR. And our other old friend, Graham Gano, was on
Right.
IR. He's probably not going to play either. They just activated his window. I doubt he's going to play in this game. So on that side of the ball, first, offense with Bryce, what are you looking for to be established in our across the pond journey?
Yeah, so I took a look at some of the Giants' rankings on defense this year, and they are much better against the pass than they are against the run currently. So, what does that tell you? Well, Mr. Canales, can we please be stubborn with the run, like you said we were going to be all off season and haven't been up to this point this season? I mean, I want to see Chuba get at least 20 touches. I've been saying that for weeks. And it seems, I don't know what it is, but it seems like they have some sort of unspoken governor on Chuba Hubbard touches. Like he only gets 15 to 17, 18 carries per game.
Yeah,
I feel like he should be touching it. I mean, Alvin Kamara had 29 carries against us. I'm not saying Chuba needs to get almost 30 carries, but he needs more than
right.
15. So I would like to see Chuba get the ball more. And then from Bryce, I just want to see him build off of the Saints game. I thought he played really well against the Saints. The things that I liked seeing from Bryce are him taking shots down the field, because to me, that is a good signifier that he's playing confidently. So I want to see him continue to test the secondary of the Giants like he did against the Saints. Take those opportunities when they're there. And then the other thing is just be decisive and also use your legs. He did it, I think, once or twice against the Saints, and he's sneaky athletic. That's one thing that I always say about Bryce. You know, he's tiny, we know that, but he's not slow. He can run. He just has to take the opportunities when they're there. So that's kind of what I'm looking for from the offense right now.
We'll get back to Bryce Young in a little bit, but switching gears to the defensive side of the ball, obviously we know Derek Brown out for the season, Jack Thompson out for the season, but guys like Trevin Wallace have stepped up, rookie from Kentucky at linebacker. Xavier Woods has been a pretty steady force on the back end. He's had some whiff on games, but overall he's been a steady force back there. J.C. Horn in the secondary. Damani Richardson, someone who's really coming on as an undrafted rookie from Texas A&M for this defense, and we might be getting some pieces back potentially. Maybe Jordan Fuller as a safety. That's my guess. I'm guessing the 4 open spots is going to be Crumedy, Fuller, Wanham, and Brooks. I think Thielen will be after the bye, as my opinion. Don't know that for sure. So what are you looking for from the defensive side of the ball against this Giant offense that has, a streaky Daniel Jones? Is like I like to say, some games against the Panthers, for some reason, he likes to do pretty well. And then this new running back, Tyrone Tracy, who I don't know a lot about, who's done pretty well for them. And obviously, you can't forget about their rookie sensation, Malik Neighbors, who I think is going to have a not so good day going up against J.C. Horn. But, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. So I'm looking for that J.C. Horn, Malik Neighbors matchup. I know Horn doesn't typically shadow guys, but he will have some reps up against Neighbors, so I'm looking forward to that. I would love to see us get pressure on Daniel Jones, because when you get pressure on Daniel Jones, he tends to make mistakes. And the problem there, though, is that our Panthers defense has not been good at all at pressuring the quarterback. So maybe if we get a couple guys back, if we get Crumedy out there, DJ Wanham out there, it would be great to see finally, what we were hoping to see this offseason, which was, Clowney and Wanham opposite of each other, because Clowney, up to this point, he hasn't really had a running mate. So he's there's a lot of pressure on him right now. So I just want to see us get pressure on Daniel Jones, limit the big plays down the field. Don't let Neighbors beat us, because that's their best player on offense. And then try to stop the run, but we've been so bad against the run. And like you mentioned, Tyrone Tracy, I picked him up in fantasy a couple weeks ago, and he's been fantastic. And I'm expecting him to have another good day against us. So, but we'll see. Just main thing, make Daniel Jones uncomfortable, try to get him to make mistakes, and then I think we have a good chance of winning the game.
I do too. I very much think this is very winnable for us. Make it 2 in a row and then head into the bye week on a really nice note. Feeling good and trying to establish some continuity for the rest of the season. I am excited about that. Quick little wager for it, not wager, but if you had to guess, what is your over under on Brian Burns' sack total?
Oh boy, 1.
I was going to say 1.5. So yeah,
okay.
I don't think he gets more than that. I like my chances with Taylor Moton against him. And on the other side, if Icky does not play, which it's looking like he may not, I actually like Brady Christensen at left tackle. I think he can really. Let's talk about him for a second. I wasn't going to go in there. Yeah. How surprising is it? And it may not be to you. I really enjoy Brady Christensen. He was someone going into the year that I was kind of sad about, because I just was thinking, man, This is last year as a rookie contract. We're probably going to lose him to free agency after this year just because he's not playing. And then some injuries happen with Corbett and others shuffling around the deck. And now he is like the most versatile offensive lineman on our team, center, tackle, played at guard, as we know, for a few years. And now, Ben, I'll be honest, I'd like to see him as our long-term center next year alongside Ickey, Moten, Hunt, and Lewis. That's our starting offensive line next year, in my humble opinion. I love Corbett. Body just is not, he cannot stay healthy, and I love the guy, and I wish him the best, and I'm thankful for his service. But I am very happy with Christensen, and I hope we re-sign him, and I think it's going to be a mutual beneficial partnership.
Yeah, he's been impressive. I mean, he's a versatile guy. You can plug him and play him at multiple positions on the offensive line, and he's filled in at both center and left tackle now well. And I think, like you said, I love Austin Corbett, but it's at this point, it's with the injuries. I mean, it's pretty concerning. And I don't know how old Austin Corbett is.
He's 28.
28. Okay, that's not as old as I thought. Christensen, what is he, like 24, 25, something like that?
He's like 27.
27. Okay. So I like Christensen. I don't know what his contract situation is, but I would like to see him stick around moving forward. At center would be great because I'm assuming it would be relatively cheap to keep him around.
Yeah, he's a free agent after this year because he was not a first round pick in that rule draft. So he is definitely going to be in the free agent market. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. Circling back now to Bryce Young before we do kind of a mid-season checkpoint is kind of what I want to call this. We'll check in about some players, but first, going back to Bryce Young. I mentioned before we hopped on, Dan Morgan and David Canales met with the media today. Obviously, we figured out Bryce was starting, which thank the Lord Almighty that happened because I was going to be rioting some folks if he did not start. I think he earned the start. Yep. But let's talk about Dan Morgan and just kind of his presser today. I know you saw what he kind of talked about. I know you tweeted about it, so I'll kind of let you take the floor since I know you tweeted about it specifically. Do you feel like that was an endorsement for Bryce Young to stick around past this season, or do you think it's simply just kind of what he said is an honest, refreshing take on Bryce Young, which is simply week to week, see how Bryce goes. All options are on the table for him, but they need to see progress. Let's let him play and just make his future more clear as the weeks go on throughout the season and make that offseason decision that much more easier.
Yeah, I came away from the Dan Morgan presser today and then Dave Canales' presser with clarity on the Bryce Young situation personally. To me, I think we got more from that Dan Morgan presser than we've gotten at any point from Canales up to this point. And my takeaway was basically they right now, they don't want to trade Bryce. They would prefer for Bryce to pan out. And that's what they're hoping happens. But at the same time, they need to see him continue to progress on the field. They need to see him play well. And he's got to take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of him. And honestly, at this point, essentially everything's on the table as far as the future for Bryce Young. He could still be here next year and be the starter going into next year. He could be here next year and they sign another quarterback and they have to compete for the job, or they could end up moving on from him and they draft another quarterback. I think everything's on the table at this point, but I like the fact that we got a little bit more clarity that, hey, Dan Morgan said, I was getting calls from people, but I never really opened that door. I was just fielding calls and, I didn't want to trade him. I still don't want to trade him. So I like where we're at. And I think Bryce has to come out this week against the Giants, and he doesn't have to light the scoreboard up, but he does need to continue to progress from how he's played the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. I would agree with mostly everything you said. I feel like I don't know if you follow Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated. Did you see his mailbag today?
I did, actually.
Okay, yeah. So I'll read this to you in case you just just to refresh your memory and tell me, if you agree with most of this or some of this, or kind of what your reaction, I guess, this is. So a guy asked him about Bryce Young, and does he feel like Bryce Young can stick around in Carolina after this season if he continues to kind of show progress like we just talked about? And essentially, Albert Beer's opinion is he doesn't think that it's likely Young will be the quarterback here for the next 5 years, but the Panthers did invest a lot in Bryce specifically, and his contract is obviously not too expensive. So essentially, 2025 draft class in the quarterback room leaves a lot to be desired, as we know, outside of guys like Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, that sort of players. And he says the comp is Tua Tagovailoa, the Miami Dolphins, where Young, kind of like Tua, got benched, or Tua like Young actually got benched, came back and was much better for it. And that's kind of what his comparison was. So do you feel like that's a good take? Do you agree with that? Or do you feel like if Young balls out the rest of this season and they do give him a shot in 2025, depending on how he does, he could be here for another 5+ years? Or because really, Ben, you and I think are pretty similar on this. A lot of people just can't get past the size.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, no matter how good he does on a box score or on the field, people are just going to say, well, it's not sustainable, Ryan. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Over the next 5 years, you just can't win with that kind of quarterback. So kind of what's your take on that?
Yeah, I would push back on those people that say that. I think that Bryce he was drafted number 1 overall for a reason. There's a reason that the majority, not all, but the majority of folks had him as the number 1 quarterback in that draft. It's because of what he did at Alabama. He was one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in college football for the better part of 2 years. So I always said when Bryce Young came into the NFL last year, he had no reason not to be confident. He was a confident player coming out of Alabama as one of the best players in the nation. Last year, the confidence was essentially beaten out of him. 62 sacks,
Yeah.
3 head coach getting fired, multiple offensive schemes, terrible offensive line, terrible receivers.
And outside of Adam Thielen, his entire receiving core is gone. Jonathan Mingo,
yes.
DJ Chark, Terrence Marshall Jr.,
Michael Strawn, or
Laviska Shenault, all gone.
Yep. So for me, I do still think it's a possibility that he's the long-term solution at quarterback, because I think that he has the talent and I think that he has the mentality. I think this guy has his head screwed on straight, and he has the perfect mentality, the perfect demeanor to handle the adversity that's been thrown at him. It's just a matter of, can he turn it around fast enough for the Panthers to not give up on him and move on. So we'll see what happens. But I'm holding out hope. I still think that he could potentially be the franchise quarterback here.
Yeah. Well, and his dad is a psychologist. That's what he does for a living. So Bryce has had some training in that department of departmentalizing things and kind of taking things at face value and just kind of not letting things get to him. And I think someone, might have been you, tweeted about this, where it's like, people want Bryce to yell, be more emotional, kind of have this shtick of be passionate, man. And I'm not going to lie. Do I want to see a little more passion? Sure. But as a man of faith myself, it's wonderful to see that Bryce is so convicted in his faith and convicted in what he believes in. And I think people sometimes just don't know if that's authentic, and they feel like he's just kind of playing to the media. But personally, I respect it, and I can see how grounded he is. And he's been the exact same way since he's been here. Very, very, very consistent.
Yeah, I think you're referring to something that I tweeted 4 or 5 hours ago. Sheena Quick posted a video from Bryce in the locker room today. She asked him about the public perception of his demeanor as far as the benching, and how people generally want to see more fire and more passion from him. And I quote tweeted the video, and I just said, you know, Bryce Young, the reality is Bryce Young is too centered and too grounded for the average football fan. he he's just he's got his head screwed on straight. He does not care what people think. He doesn't pay attention to it. He really doesn't. And he's going to be who he is off the field. Like that's not going to change and people don't have to like it. That's his personality. But I will say I thought against the Saints he showed some fire and some passion on the field. And that's something that we haven't seen from him in a while. And I really, really liked seeing that. I hope we see that more.
Yeah. Well, as we get to the down the stretch of the rest of our time together here, episode number 51 of Inside the Vault, Ben from the Keep Purring Podcast is the my guest today here on Inside the Vault. Ben, let's get into kind of what I'm going to call mid-season check-ins with the Panthers, and I'm just going to give you a couple rapid fire, and you can just kind of tell me your thoughts on this, on these topics, and just kind of a check-in here as we cross the midpoint of the season with their Panthers going to Germany this weekend to face the Giants, midway point of the season. On offense, who do you think has been the MVP of this team so far? Who's been really a steady surprise for you on that side of the ball?
I'd say the MVP has been Chuba Hubbard. I just think he's been amazing, even with not getting enough touches. I think he's like, what is he, sixth in the NFL in rushing yards right now?
So now, but yeah,
fifth. Yeah, he's been my MVP, and then surprise on offense. I think I've got to go with Jalen Coker. I've got to go with Coker. I've been a huge fan of his ever since we picked him up, and I'm loving what I'm seeing from him so far.
And on the defensive side of the ball, what do you got there?
MVP, I got to go with J.C. Horn because I just think he's been so steady and he's stayed healthy, which he hasn't been able to do in the past. Knock on wood. And as far as a surprise, I mean, I'll just go with a recent guy, Damani Richardson, undrafted free agent. Again, just like Jalen Coker, undrafted free agent, big time contributor. He's led the team in tackles the last 2 games, double digit tackles. So I'm excited to see what he can do moving forward.
Yeah. And it's funny. I did the math on this, and since 2019, we have drafted approximately 40 players, and we have let go in some capacity, trade, release, cut, wave, whatever you want to call it, 22 of those 40, now 23 actually with Jonathan Mingo. Oh. And so that's 17 players that remained on our roster between 2019 and 2024. And then seeing guys like Jalen Coker, like Damani Richardson, who are undrafted guys, is great. But this team has got to learn how to hit between rounds 2 and 7. You just hit on your first round picks and expect to field a great team. Mike K, the Charlotte Observer, a friend of the pod, he's been on both of our podcasts. I know he talks about this team last year with Frank Reich and this year with Dave Canales. It's just top heavy because there is no room for injuries because this team has just been so shallow of talent due to either just whiffing on draft picks or trading people away. And so I think that for the Panthers to start winning consistently again, they have got to retain some talent on both sides of the ball. But mainly what that means is rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, especially in the draft, let's start. We don't hit on all of them, and most GMs don't. But I think we're up to what 9 picks in the draft right now.
I think so.
April. So if we're gonna hit on 6 of those players, I mean, right? Like, we're not gonna hit on all 9, obviously, but like 6 of those players, that's a great start for this, bringing the Panthers back to some depth, foundational pieces, and I still get it just burns me when it comes to like some of the choices that these front offices have made over the past 5 to 6 years. Going back to, and just a quick recap, McCaffrey, I think people understood with the injury history. San Francisco gave you all that minutia back. Tough to see him go, but I think people understood that. Mm-hmm. I think hindsight being 2020, people probably thought Brian Burns should have been traded to the LA Rams for those 2 first-round picks or included in that trade for Bryce Young instead of DJ Moore, because that just was a hurtful trade there. And then obviously, Brian Burns instead got shipped to the Giants when it's like, well, your leverage was lost at that point, and what you got back was just absolutely what you should not have gotten back. You should have gotten back a lot more. And so just a lot of things that this franchise has done over the past 5 years that I think all of those moves plus the draft capital that you whiff on, it's going to lead to a shallow depth. It's going to lead to where we are now, not to mention Tepper with his impulsiveness as well. And so give the Panthers, as we wrap up here, we have the remaining games down the stretch, 8 more games after the Giants, 7 more actually after the Giants. What's kind of some things you're looking for from a positivity standpoint down the stretch with the rest of the season, but then also just going into the offseason, which we can do obviously later on. We'll have you back on again, but just some positivity, some hope for Panther fans like us who are kind of doing these podcasts, and we're trying to be as positive as we can, but sometimes it can be hard to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes it can be easy to get caught in that darkness that sometimes feels like we're in.
Yeah, it's tough being a Panthers fan. It's tough out here in these streets. I think it would be great if we could squeeze out another couple wins. 2 more wins, we would double our win total from last year. So, hey, that's something. I'm not sure how confident I am that we're going to win 2 more games, but you never know. Outside of the wins, though, because I'm not expecting us to win very many more games, I just want to see them continue to be competitive on both sides of the ball, because to me, that will signify that they are bought in. The players are bought in on what Dave Canales is trying to do, what Ejiro Evero is trying to do on that side of the ball. Because really, coming into this season, obviously, we all want to win. We all want to win as many games as possible. But coming into this season, like for me, kind of the 2 main things that I was concerned about was, number one, Bryce Young's development. How's he going to look this year? And it hasn't taken the path that I thought it was going to take, but we're here now where he's come back from the benching and he's looking a little bit better. And then number 2 was Dave Canales' journey as a head coach. And, I knew that he would go through some growing pains, but the players seem to like playing for him. And I want to continue to see the competing on both sides of the ball. I don't want to see us getting blown out, because you can tell when players are not putting in maximum effort. So I just want to see us playing hard. I'd love to squeak out a couple more wins. I'd love to see the young guys continue to flourish. Like we mentioned Coker and Damani, but then Leggett has been impressive, and Trevin Wallace on the defensive side of the ball. I just want to continue to see the young guys coming through. Jatavian Sanders had a great game last week against the Saints.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Killed it. So I just want to see the young guys continue to progress and, just go into the offseason with good vibes about the whole situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's early, but it looks like Dan Morgan has killed on this draft class 2024 early returns. Hoping someone like Jaden Crumity, we could see him down the stretch here become a little bit of a depth piece on the defensive line, especially with Brown out right now. He'll get a lot of snaps. And we can string a couple more of these draft classes together with a lot of these hits. I think that depth is going to come back. And you said, the culture buying in. The only thing with Dave I want to see more of, in my opinion, is, and I get it, they were trying to showcase Sanders for the trade deadline, but now that that's gone, let's stop doing Miles Sanders screen passes, especially on 4th and 2. Dave, let's go down the field on 4th and 2. Let's not go horizontal. Let's go vertical. Yeah. And let's not get too cute on some of the things that we're doing. Like, now, don't get me wrong. Some of the things that they did, the fake punt a couple times, like, I like those to an extent because it shows that you're willing to try things, but and it's not like Hecker's a bad thrower of the football. He did this all the time with the Rams back in the day. So some of the stuff I don't hate, but I think Canales has grown. People got to remember he's a first-time play caller with the Bucs last year, second year doing this, really, first time as a head coach, and he's learning. And I think he said this the other day. He told his wife, he said, "I'm full, but I'm also empty." So every day he comes home and he says that. So it's he's learning so much, and yet he feels like he's emptying himself every day. And so he's got a lot on his plate. And I think people need to realize it takes a little bit of time for these guys to adjust because, you know, yes, Dave, so to put it in a little bit of context, while he is a play caller, it's hard to call plays and be the head coach. Andy Reid does that. Sean McVay does that, but not everyone can do that because if you not, and I'm not saying because he's a bad play caller. What I'm trying to say is when you're the head coach, you can't just do your stuff on the offense or defensive side of the ball anymore and expect to be showing up on Sundays ready to go. Player gets in trouble at 2 a.m. Guess who they're calling? They're calling you. There's things that that's going to happen as an organization that, with you as the head coach, you have a lot more responsibility. I think people may not realize that as much when you have a head coach in the National Football League and someone with Dave Canales who's happens to also be calling plays. So I think there's a lot that kind of goes into that. And the nuances that people may not just realize as much. Well, Ben, before we get you out of here, I'll get a sport prediction from you from Munich this week, Panthers Giants. What do you feel like is going to be what's your prediction for this Sunday, and will the Panthers come out on top for their third victory of the year?
I do think the Panthers are going to come out on top. I think Bryce Young is going to continue to build on the progress that we've seen the last couple of weeks. We scored 23 against the Saints, right? So
yes.
I think we're going to up that a little bit. I think I'm going to go 26-17 Panthers.
Okay. And you already said one sack for Brian Burns potentially. So we'll see.
He's going to get one.
If he gets one, that'll be there. Well, last question for you, for Ben, and again, thank you for coming on the pod tonight. Good to talk with you. Good to catch up with you. But last one from me. What is something we as the Panther, whether it's us as fans or here as podcasters, what's something we're not talking about enough with the Panthers? It doesn't have to be necessarily the team. It could be somebody individually. Things to watch for this offseason, something that's happening right now. What's something we're not talking about enough when it comes to this Panthers team?
Man, that's a really good question, which is what people say when they don't have an immediate answer. Maybe this isn't, I'll just say this. I don't know if this is necessarily something that people aren't talking about enough, but I do think that I have my opinion on this is an unpopular opinion, and I'm basing this off of Panthers Twitter, which is a whole different world than Panthers fans in general. But I think that Dan Morgan and Brant Tillis have done a pretty excellent job since they took over. I mean, a lot of people think that, they're always going to relate Dan Morgan back to Scott Fitterer, that he was his right-hand man. And I get that. But the reality is Dan Morgan wasn't making those final decisions. Scott Fitterer was. And we don't know. We'll never know if Dan Morgan signed off on all of those decisions during that tenure. But since Dan Morgan has been in the GM chair and since Brent Tillis got here, all the moves we made this offseason on offense, bringing in the offensive line pieces, the draft, we're already seeing positive returns on that. We knew that they weren't going to be able to spend a lot of money on defense because we spent so much money on offense. So I guess I'm just using this as a chance to plug the fact that I just think Dan Morgan and Brent Tillis have done a really good job with this team in a very short period of time. And we have 9 draft picks going into next year. And I just think it's something to be hopeful about, and it's something to be positive about. I think that Dan Morgan gets crapped on a little bit too much for my liking.
Yeah. I lied. I'll kind of answer my own question there, and you can react to this if you want, and I'm willing to hear. Wouldn't it be the most Panther thing ever, though? We play the Kansas City Chiefs coming off the bye down in Charlotte. Patrick Mahomes' first trip to Bank of America Stadium. Teddy Bridgewater almost won in Kansas City back in 2020. Now, granted, Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore were still Panthers, and pretty healthy defense at that time too, as well. But wouldn't it be ironic if Bryce Young could trade blows with Patrick Mahomes in Charlotte and the Panthers kept the game close and obviously no one's expecting them to win, obviously. But if they pulled that off and the Chiefs hadn't lost at this point, I hate
That'd
to
be
say
incredible.
I hate to say this, Ben, though. It's not going to be the Panthers won. It's going to be, well, the Chiefs laid a dud, and that happens. It happens every year. The Chiefs will lose to a team they're not supposed to lose to, and
but we'd be singing. Panthers fans will be singing in the streets, and that would be what an incredible story that would be for Bryce Young's trajectory.
His confidence. I'm just going to say it here first. I do not think we're going to beat the Chiefs. That's not what I'm saying here. But I do think it's going to be a closer game than people expect. And I'm not saying that to be a homer. I'm saying that because you look at the Chiefs, they are a team that have won in different ways. That's not a good team. 2-time Super Bowl champions. We know that. But they're not as good as they've been these past few years. They are very, very beatable. All three NFC South teams, New Orleans probably the least of the three, had their chances in their games against the Chiefs. Bucks took it to overtime. Atlanta called a really bad fourth down play. Otherwise, they would have maybe gone to overtime or even won the game. New Orleans was in there till the second half, and then they kind of just got smoked out of the building. But the Panthers, my bold prediction is I think they're going to keep it close in a few weeks against those Chiefs. Probably won't come out on top, but obviously, like you said, if they did, it would be a story, especially for Bryce Young and his comeback, if you will. So,
it'd be amazing.
Well, it would be amazing. Yeah. Well, as I said at the top, my guest today has been Tucker here of the Keep Purring Podcast. Also, his co-host Eric, as I said, is in Germany, Amsterdam, as he said. To enjoy Panthers Giants on Sunday. Ben, all the best to you. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
And that'll wrap up this episode of Inside the Vault, episode number 51. I'm your host, Ryan Smith. Rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We will see you next time.